Each year, fans excitedly await the latest and greatest release in the Call of Duty franchise. And frankly, it's one of the best games today that you could just hop on your buddies, play a few rounds, grind out your next weapon attachment or camo, and just have a good time. As a regular to the series, I've played more than a handful of these releases year after year, and I will say it's absolutely crazy to see how much this series has just snowballed out of control. From crazy animated camos to playing with the literal Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Today I want to take a look back at the game that catapulted me into the world of Call of Duty and has gone down as my favorite Call of Duty game of all time. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and no, I'm not referring to the 2022 reboot either. In 2009, Infinity Ward unknowingly struck gold with their sequel to the critically acclaimed Modern Warfare entry. For those of you who may not be aware, Call of Duty has a unique development cycle. Typically, it switches between different production teams just to allow for the annual release schedule. Buys them a little bit more time and allows each team to polish the game before it reaches the masses. More impressively, this release was right on the heels of Call of Duty World at War. Development team Treyarch's claim to fame. This is the game that first introduced Call of Duty's iconic Zombies mode, which is still in modern releases to this day. World at War was actually my first Call of Duty game, and I've played more than my own fair share of rounds of Zombies. But when you put these two side by side, it's crazy to think that only a year separates the two release dates. MW2, as we'll refer to it going forward, just to save my own time and sanity, somehow perfectly balanced a single-player campaign mode, a couch co-op focused spec-ops mode, and a killer multiplayer game mode where I dumped dozens of hours. Each game mode provided its own dynamic experience, and no single mode outshined the others. And just before we go too much further, guys, some of the events in this story may be disturbing to some viewers, so please be advised. And I hope I don't need to say this, but for a game that's over 15 years old, spoilers are definitely ahead. Just as you would start with the game, let's start off with a campaign. It's definitely the meat of it. It was a super strong story full of iconic characters that actually felt impactful to the story's development. What I thought was super clever is the story actually kicks off with an introduction at the firing range. This allows players to quickly get a grip on the controls and slowly starts to hint the underlying story. General Shepard, a character that we'll come to learn more about, is recruiting members for his elite fighting force, Task Force 141. And you, the player, are running the obstacle course trying to show off your skills. This little segment is super addictive, and I'll be the first to admit that I played through it multiple times just trying to reach the veteran difficulty, which made me a little bit overly confident, let's be honest with us all. Man. I decided to actually play through this time on hardened, a decision that the game would decide to regularly remind me was not a good idea. Now we flash forward to our first real taste of combat, if you will, with our character who we come to find out is Private Joseph Allen. He's doing your standard convoy action in Afghanistan when his patrol comes under heavy fire. It's here where Allen truly shows his worth, fighting after dozens of enemies, clearing a schoolyard and making your way across town, protecting all of your troops. And this is what firmly secures his spot in Shepard's Task Force 141. We then cut to the other members of Task Force 141 literally dangling off a cliff somewhere in Russia. The introduction to this mission speaks for itself and goes super hard.
Break's over, Roach. Let's go.
Captain Soap McTavish and Sergeant Gary Roach Sanderson are infiltrating an airbase to commandeer an ACS module, which still don't know what that stands for. Some sort of electronic device, not super important, but super important to the story, that the Russians have captured. This is intended to be a stealth mission. I didn't do that so well, but it's intended to be a stealth mission, where you sneak past all the guards in near whiteout condition, only using a heartbeat sensor to avoid their patrols. You make your way into one of the hangars where you secure the ACS module, and as you're about to slip out the back door, your position is compromised.
Roach, go to Plan B.
No other choice, you make out with a bang, literally detonating the explosives and diving out into the snowy covered landscape. You make your way and commandeer 2 sleds and run and gun your way down the mountain. A super epic sequence entails where you're shooting with one hand, steering with the other, guys on sleds after you, trees in your way, going down a mountain, and taking an absolute leap of faith that would put the Dukes of Hazzard to shame. We flash back to Private Allen, our Army Ranger from earlier, with his first big boy assignment. He was sent undercover as a part of the CIA to get close to Makarov. Makarov being our primary antagonist. His whole goal is to plunge Russia and the United States into an all-out nuclear war. And Allen finds himself in a little bit too deep when Makarov decides to take him to a Russian international airport. Turns out he's an accessory to a terrorist attack. This mission, appropriately named No Russian, was and is exceedingly controversial. I don't want to show too much of the clips in this video for what should be obvious reasons, but it actually has the player play through the attack, which is kind of messed up. And as the group finally thinks that they can make their getaway, it's then that we learn that we were playing directly into Makarov's hand. As when loading into the getaway vehicle, Makarov turns and shoots Allen, leaving him for dead. All of this to place the blame of the terrorist attack on the United States.
When they find that body, all of Russia will cry for war.
Meanwhile, back with the task force, they realize that they're in hot water and need to hunt down evidence to prove that Makarov was behind the attacks. The team finds themselves deep in a favela in Rio de Janeiro, chasing a weapons dealer trying to get in contact with someone who may know where Makarov is. Their target, Alejandro Rojas. And chasing him through the streets is no simple task, as I personally would come to find out. Yeah, hardened difficulty, this is where it bit me. Listen, this is where I collected the most amount of deaths in the game over and over and over again, and made me regret my decisions. I don't know why the 4th or 5th mission, whatever this was this difficult, but come to find out, this for me was the most difficult one in the entire game. So if you can get past this, you can make it the rest of the way. Regardless, back to the story. We finally do catch up with Rojas, and unfortunately, he doesn't have a whole lot to go on. The only information that he has is that Makarov's worst enemy is currently incarcerated in a specific Russian gulag. And under the principle of the enemy of my enemy, or at least that's as much as I can guess, the task force dispatches to extract prisoner 627. Jumping back stateside, we're introduced to Sergeant Foley and his crew. We come to find out that Russia wasted no time and has already decided to take revenge on the United States. And Foley's group has been recruited by Shepard himself to protect the suburbs of Virginia and keep civilians safe, trying to buy the task force as much time as possible. I will also say, at this point, Infinity Ward really likes starting missions with exploding vehicles and chaos, and this is a perfect example. Anyways, flashing back to our guys in Brazil, by this point, everybody and their brother wants them for dead, and they're forced to make a treacherous escape over the rooftops of the favela. It's here that we actually meet Nikolai, a complete madman of a pilot, that pulls moves straight out of the movie The Matrix with his helicopter to avoid incoming RPG fire. Our team chased down the helicopter, deciding to make a literal leap of faith, which I totally made on my first attempt, and escape as the militia closes in below them.
Nikolai, we got him! Get us out of here!
Returning to Foley and his team, we learn that they're tasked with extracting a high-value individual from one of these Virginian suburbs. The team has to fight their way through a heavily occupied area, but at least this time, they're accompanied by a honey badger, which, for those of you who don't know, is some super overkill armored vehicle with a cannon, not to be confused with a tank, but like kind of is. Anyways, the team finally makes their way to the safe house, although unfortunately, it seems they were a little bit too late, as the safe house was already compromised. But what's a little bit unsettling is it seems the safe house was taken with little to no force, but there's no time to really cover that right now. Too late to extract the high-value individual, Foley's crew push on to DC to assist with further evacuation efforts. We rejoin the task force as they decide to reclaim a Russian oil rig. Why this is consequential to the story, I am personally not entirely sure, but they do have a totally sick sequence where they drag divers into the ocean, then promptly jump up. You have crazy smoke scenes where you're using thermal scopes to shoot through the distance and eliminate enemies. And the cherry on top for this section is you have slow motion breach and clear where you place the C4 on, blow up the room, have to shoot the bad guys, don't shoot the civilians. This mission seems like it was forced in just to do cool stuff, and I am 100% for it. So it's sick. Definitely would play through this mission more than once. But before, or rather right after that, you take off in the helicopter and make your way to the Russian gulag. Again, don't really know why we needed the oil rig, but I'm so here for it. By the time we get to the gulag, we find out that the Navy is already tearing the place apart, and General Shepard really doesn't do much to help us here. So our team has to enter the gulag while actively under fire, which gives them little to no time to find the prisoner, as the walls are literally collapsing all around them. There are several breach and clear segments here, and a copious amount of riot shielders, which absolutely lovely to try to deal with. Totally not sarcasm. And cherry on top for this one are guards on the upper levels that will shoot you from angles you've never seen before. By the time we finally make it to prisoner 627, we come to find out that it is none other than Captain John Price.
Drop it!
Price? This belongs to you, sir.
For those of you who don't know, he's a character captured during the events of the first game, but what's most important, all you really need to know, is he's a complete badass. With Price in tow, the team now have to make their way out, which is easier said than done, but in true Hollywood fashion, you know, just pull out a rocket launcher, shoot the ceiling, grab that rope, and get yoinked right out of the prison at the last possible moment. Cue the full-on Michael Bay explosion. We cut back to Foley's crew stateside, and we see that they're barely hanging on for dear life. Almost everywhere is in complete ruin in DC. You've got way more enemies than they know what to do with, and helicopters are coming in non-stop. Foley's crew's really only option is to commandeer one of the Hornets' nests, grab a javelin, and start rocking down those helicopters as fast and as often as they can. It's very clear that they can't hold on much longer, and they need the task force to act and act now. And this is when Price decides to go directly against Shepard's orders and sneak into a Russian sub-base. I must say, this is my personal favorite mission in the entire game, and probably one of the most iconic stealth missions altogether. You play as Roach, and with the assistance of Captain Price, you have to sneak through the wintry landscapes and slowly pick off the patrols one by one. As he calls out, shoot the guy on the left, shoot the guy on the right, take out these guys. Like, it's super action movie intense and epic, all culminating with you making your way to the sub base and the absolute mad lad that is Captain Price commandeering a sub and shooting what I could only guess is either a nuclear or ballistic missile towards DC as a last-ditch effort to stop the war. And in the process, practically destroying the International Space Station. But we won't talk about that. Cutting back to Foley's crew, we actually get to see the other side of this missile or whatever it is, as it acts as some sort of a EMP and literally knocks all the Russian helicopters out of the sky. This is effectively ending the onslaught of Russian troops somehow, some way, and making the task force mission a resounding success and putting an end to Russians on the United States soil. But this alone is not cause for celebration, as Shepard still wants to send the task force after Makarov. Fearing that he might go into hiding, Task Force 141 decides to split. Roach and Ghost set out for a safe house on the outskirts of the Georgian border, whereas Soap and Captain Price decide to make their way to an aircraft boneyard in Afghanistan. We'll first focus on Roach and Ghost, as they're tasked with raiding the estate and gathering the intel regarding the terrorist attacks on the Russian airport. The two hold their position while fighting off wave after wave of enemies, trying to buy themselves just enough time for the intel to upload to their server. As enemy forces become more and more overwhelming, as soon as the intel uploads, the pair make a break for the woods and their exfil. And as the two narrowly make it out with their lives, as Roach is literally being dragged to the exfil, fighting off enemies as they flood from the estate, they're greeted by Shepard and his men. And in a turn of events, it seems that Shepard never intended for these two to make it out alive, as he turns and guns them both down. It seems this whole mission was solely to cover his tracks and his attachment to the botched mission with Alan mentioned earlier in the game. Shepard wanted to only go down as the hero that ended the war, but not the villain that started it. Now privy that Shepard has turned on them, Soap and Captain Price have to navigate the boneyard, avoiding both Makarov's men and Shepard's troops, where they turn to none other than Makarov himself to learn of Shepard's hideout location and plan how they're going to avenge their fallen comrades. It's this that sends them both into a literal suicide mission, trying to hunt down Shepard and make him pay for what he's done. The pair fight their way into Shepard's compounds, taking down most of, if not all of his guards, and culminating into a water rapid chase, complete with pursuing attack helicopters and copious amounts of explosions. The group go careening off a waterfall, crash, and finally have a one-on-one showdown with Shepard. Soap attempts to take on Shepard, but unfortunately, he is no match in hand-to-hand combat, as Shepard promptly stabs him in the chest. He leaves Soap laying there, bleeding out, as Captain Price uses what little energy he has left to try to ward off Shepard. But this in turn buys Soap just enough time to actually use the knife that's lodged in his chest and throw it directly into Shepard's head. By some complete miracle, the pair managed to take him down.
Come on,
The
get up.
pair hobble themselves to Nikolai, waiting in an exfil helicopter, just lucky to make it out with their lives, and knowing that now they can set the record straight.
Looks like it still is. They'll be looking for us, you know.
Nikolai, we've got to get Soap out of here.
Nah. I know a place.
As the credits roll, I can't help but think how satisfying the story is to play, even today. Sure, it's over the top in many different ways, but so are action films. And really, that's exactly it. It makes the player feel like an action hero. And what I can appreciate is it doesn't shy away from having important or critical characters pay the price of war. Now, I'm not saying that General Shepard's win at any cost character is the best of all time. It's a little bit over the top, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't make for a great villain. And overall, I'm just glad that I went back to play it again. If you have the opportunity to do so, even just the campaign, I'd say it's worth your time. I especially recommend the remastered version of the campaign, which is what I used for capturing the footage for this video. And although I jokingly said it was a little bit unfair at points, I do think that the hardened difficulty gave a good balance of risk and reward. But if you're not playing the remaster, you're still left with spec ops and online multiplayer modes. Now, I will say for this video, I did play a little bit of the spec ops, at least as a solo player, and I know it's meant to be played in co-op or online with your friends, so keep that in mind. But it allowed me to replay some of the key moments from the story and added layers of additional enemies, more waves, a time requirement, and really pushed you to just have fun and try to earn the most amount of stars for performing better or surviving longer. All the missions in Spec Ops are organized by difficulty level, easiest being Alpha, followed by Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and lastly Echo being the most difficult. And while I played a handful of these, and maybe it's just because I played through the campaign right before doing so, did make me struggle a little bit to stay occupied with these missions. I'm sure for completionists it may be a little bit different, but I only played a handful of them once or twice before moving on. But then that also left us with the online multiplayer, the game mode that in the past I probably sunk the most amount of time into. And I must say that at the time of this recording, I was pleasantly surprised. I, full disclosure, played on a random Tuesday night, and I was able to easily hop into both Team Deathmatch and Free-for-All matches. And for context, this is on the PlayStation 3, so I would imagine you probably even have better results on other platforms. Now, I'll be the first to admit that because of the low population, when you drop out of a match and rejoin a match, you're more than likely going to end up with the same people. So, skill-based matchmaking, yeah, that's kind of out the window. And one other thing I will say is if you play in a match where, like I did, where someone's using a copious amount of explosives, you can't really avoid that because you're just going to get thrown right back into the same lobby. But it's still cool to find out you can just hop in, play a couple rounds, have some fun. I will add the caveat that Team Deathmatch and Free-for-All seem the most successful for me. My favorite game mode in all Call of Duties is Domination, and when I tried to join a match, I know it's a Tuesday, maybe on the weekends I'd have better success, but it kept loading and loading and it didn't end up finding anybody. So please keep in mind if Domination or maybe Capture the Flag are your preferred game modes, probably not worth your time. Also worthy of note, I was pleasantly surprised to find out that when I was playing, I didn't run into any modded lobbies or hackers or anything like that. So that's an added benefit, as that was one of my real fears of going back to this game. I was able to play more than a handful of matches, re-unlock create a class, customize a handful of weapons, realized that I never was that good at quick scopes or no scopes or whatever, let's be honest with ourselves. And I was even able to confirm that yes, throwing knives are definitely as satisfying as you remember them. That was a ton of fun. All that is to say, if you have a PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, a copy of the PC version of the game, and you want to dust it off and give it a go, yeah, it's a pretty good time for an evening. In fact, I'd recommend it. But this is when I should really address the elephant in the room. And that is, I'm not expecting everybody to just have a PlayStation 3 or have an Xbox 360 or have access to this game. The reality is you're more than likely going to have a more modern platform and just be trying to experience it. If you're used to more modern Call of Duties, it's not quite the same. The movement feels slow. You add that to the limited lobbies, and in terms of online multiplayer, I hate to say it, but I do think you're better off experiencing a more modern Call of Duty anyways. More customization, easier to set up, probably just the better way to go. I'm sure there's a case to be made for Spec Ops here, but myself personally, I really didn't get enough out of it playing as a solo player. If I had someone to couch co-op with, maybe it's different. I think for those of you who really want to go back and experience the game, is just playing the remastered campaign available on modern consoles. But let me know down in the comments what you guys think, especially if you've gone back and played it for yourself. I'd love to hear what you have to say. I want to thank you all guys if you made it this far. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. If you like this style of content and want to see other games that I've covered, I highly recommend that you check out my Do You Remember playlist, as a bunch of other games that I go back and revisit. As well as if you have suggestions, again, let me know down in the comments what else you might want me to go back and check out. I love doing this kind of stuff. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time that we have for today. As always, guys, this has been your host, TheLostYeti. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next episode.